Hello, this is James Hudnall, and welcome to Creative Secrets. This is a new series I'll be doing about the act of creating stories and other fictions and creations through media. In the first series, we'll be talking about comic books. I have 32 years experience in the business, and I have a lot to share on the subject. I'm an award-winning writer. I've been internationally published. I've won international awards, and I would like to tell you the things that I've learned in the course of my career. This is just a start. And before we continue, please click this subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't done so already. The more subscribers I have, the better it will be for me, and more I'll be able to continue to do this series. So thank you very much. I'm going to keep these videos short and simple, so I'm only going to cover things directly without elaborating too much. We'll get into elaboration in later videos, but in this initial startup video, it's more like a beginner thing. So first of all, if you want to write a story and you have an idea that you want to do, there's 5 things that you need to be able to answer, 5 questions, and those 5 questions will help you to continue and write your story much better than if you just started with a rough idea or a scene, because those things are not ways to start a story. Those things are part of a later process. But initially, you want to break down and answer these 5 questions. If you can answer these 5 questions, you'll be a lot closer to having a coherent story. As many times I talk to people and they can't answer 5 questions, and I just know from that they don't really know where their story is going, and that their story is just sort of made up as they went along, and that's not really the way to do it. So let's delve into the 5 questions. The first and most obvious question you should answer is, who is your character? Who is your hero? Who is your protagonist? That is something you should know. Now, a hero or protagonist does not have to be a person. It can be a dog or cat, it could be a mountain, it could be a planet. But ultimately, your character needs to be imbued with human attributes or personality or a thought process or something of that nature. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for the audience to relate to that character. So you should think of that. But let's just stick to the basics here. Do you know who they are, what they want, etc.? That is something we'll get into in the following questions. But the main thing is you need to have a sense of the character and all the attributes of that character in order to make them fully believable and recognizable as a person. We'll get into that in later chapters as far as the details of building out characters. But you should start with a character and you should have an idea of who they are and what they are. Now that you know who your character is, you now have to answer the second question, which is, what is their goal? What is their desire? What is it that they're seeking? Because every story is about somebody wanting something. That is the fact. Human beings relate to desire of some kind. Now we'll get into that in more detail in the third question, but we want to talk about the goal. What is their grail? What is their MacGuffin? What is the thing that they are seeking? Because that is a driving energy that keeps the story moving. If a character wants something, people can relate to that because everybody wants something. From the second you're born, you want air, you want mother, you want something to keep you going. And that is what a story is about. It is about a person wanting something. The driving force. I call it the grail. Some people call it MacGuffin. It can be a lot of things. But it is a driving force, and you have to understand what that is. What is it they want? Above all else, what is the most important thing that they seek in the story? Because forget about outside of the story. I know it's a character, but you have to understand, you have to see it as a 3-dimensional person. And they will have all kinds of subsidiary desires and wants that may appear in the story, but they have an ultimate goal that is greater than all of them, and that is the focus. So what are you focusing on in this story? Okay, this is an overlooked thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand, but it is a critical question, so that's why I include it in my 5 questions. And that is there a desire, conscious or unconscious? Because that can affect the nature of the story, it can affect a lot of things. And it will also give you insight into the character and their actions. Now, to keep it simple here, there's most of the time you see people have a conscious desire. That is like Batman desires to fight crime, for example. But his unconscious desires are sometimes explored by writers to give the character more dimension and depth. That is one of the tools that conscious and unconscious desire can be applied to a story to give it some depth. You can have multiple layers. You can have a conscious desire that the character knows they want, and they can have an unconscious desire that they're not aware of until the story's events kind of bring it to their attention and they come to a conclusion or they react in a certain way. So it can be a very powerful tool if used properly. And you can do multiples of desires, but ultimately you want to keep it simple because too many things can distract people and you want to keep their attention focused where you want it to be. So this is a very important question. Does your character have a conscious or unconscious desire? Having answered the second question, now you have to answer this one. Question number 4. What is the character's opposition? What is the villain? What is the antagonist? What stands in the way of your character? Your character has a goal. There is somebody or something that is going to step in their way. And that is what the story's conflict can arrive from. This is a very important question because your story, in order to be interesting, in order to have any weight, people do not relate to stories where nothing happens or where people can easily obtain things. That's boring. You want your story to be interesting. So first of all, what is it that prevents the character from achieving their goal, or what stands in their opposition? This is one thing that you need to understand. It does not have to be a person. It can be a thing, like, let's say, a storm, or it can be their own fears. It can be a lot of things, but there is something that prevents them from getting from point A to point B. And the story is about how they overcome that or don't. The moral of the story will be whether they can overcome something or not. And that is the thing that you have to explore in your story. But you definitely have to understand that this question is very paramount and it's important. Number 5, and the most important question of them all. What is the change in the story? Why should we care? I mean, the story is going to be about something, but why should we care? Well, what change occurs that has an effect on the character? People understand cause and effect, and for a story to have relevance to a person, when they see a story, and if you want them to remember it, they need to learn something as they're also being entertained. And what you learn is by watching the character and seeing if they make smart decisions or bad ones, and in the end they come out either on top or on the bottom. The whole thing about change in a story is there has to be a negative net change, positive or negative. Now, you can have multiple versions of that in the story, so you can have a character start out rich, become poor, and then rich again. but there has to be a change of some sort that happens. People understand cause and effect. They can relate to that. What they can't relate to is a story where nothing happens or it's all pointless. That is a big mistake that I see in a lot of fiction, and I'm sure you have too. You've seen movies or read books where there was no point in the whole experience and it was a waste of your time. Well, obviously you don't want to go in that direction, so I'm telling you, this is a very important one. We need to understand what the character learned in the course of the story. What was the net result of what happened? It has to have an impact of some kind, and that is something you have to think about. And that will also play a big part into your ending, so the ending can be very powerful if you can work it out that what happens in the story also has a big impact on the character, on the way they think or on what they perceive the world around them or whatever. There's a lot of ways you can go. That's up to you. But I'm telling you that you really, in order for your story to have weight, this is something that you really have to consider. Okay, thanks for listening to this chapter. This is part 1 of a series that will be ongoing. And as a supplemental material, I suggest you check out my book, The Secrets of Writing by James Hudnall, available on ebook sellers everywhere. For Amazon, link will be in the description below. And a lot of the material that I will be covering will be from this book, but I will elaborate on it more extent. There will also be adding a lot of new stuff. And also, please subscribe and click the notification bell if you haven't done so already. And check out my new comic book series, Agenda, which the link will be below in the description. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time.